What's up, Line Golf Academy members? Welcome back, and it's been over a month that I've uploaded the video. Had some health issues, but I'm almost back to 100%. Unlike my golf game, which has suffered, and I haven't touched the club in over a month, so we will eventually get back to the break par series. But in the meantime, I wanted to upload a video and talk about statistics, specifically some statistics that you can take note of, and this will really help you become a better scorer and learn more about your game and game management. We're going to look at LPGA and PGA Tour stats, look at what's important, look at the discrepancies between the best versus the worst on tour, and how you can use this information and start keeping some basic stats to adjust the way you practice. But in the meantime, if you do like this at any time, hit that like, share, and subscribe. It really helps the channel grow. But enough of that spicy jello. Let's get to the video. Okay, so we're on LPGA's website looking at statistics, and I fumbled across Ayaka Furui, and I probably butchering that name, so forgive me if that is not how you pronounce that name, but if you do know, let me know in the comments if I'm close or not. Let's first look at her 2022 statistics, and we're going to see some top 10s on a few of these. We see driving accuracy is 8, rounds on a par is 7, total rounds played, which means she's playing quite a bit, but that's about it. We have one there, Rolex Rookie of the Year, 3rd, so she almost made Rookie of the Year. And we see the official money list is $957. Now, what we're going to do is take a look at her stats on 2024, and we'll see a huge change. Look at this. Look at all the 1s, 2s, and 3s. Now, I know that we're partly into the season, but she's already made more money than she did on the full season in 2022. Total events played 1 and 1, so she's definitely played every event so far. Round in the 60s, 1 birdies, 1 rounds on the par, 1 scoring average, 2. Now we notice that it's a big change with all these 1s and 2s and 3s, but how close is it compared to other tour professionals, and what can this help you recognize to focus on? Now, if I had to pick 1 or 2 of these stats that she needs to work on currently, is this sand save at 40%. You can see it's 88th, and although she doesn't hit it very far comparatively speaking, we can see that driver distance does not make that much of a difference when you are still with the most rounds on a par and the second lowest scoring average on tour. So it's not about driving distance. It is more importantly about this driving accuracy, because driving accuracy, if you can hit a fairway in regulation, your odds of hitting the next green in regulation jump up by 50%. And we're going to look at some statistics from LPGA and PGA that back this up. Secondly, we're going to look at the greens in regulation. You can see she has many more fairways than she does greens, but 70% is quite high. Putts per green regulation is pretty good, top 10. Putting average is top 20. Now remember, your putting average will increase the more greens you hit in regulation because there's less chances for up and downs. And when you do an up and down, you can see that'll bring your numbers down, which is why putts per green in regulation is the most important one. This is factoring in all the greens she hit in regulation. Putting average factors in not only greens in regulation, but up and down. So you will see that dramatically lower. But how close is everybody? So let's just take a look at the scoring average. The best player on tour right now, which is Nelly Korda, averaging exactly 7.08. Now, if we take a look at the worst player on the LPGA Tour, we're looking at 76.2, which is about 6 strokes difference in every round of golf, which for the LPGA on a 4-day event is 24 strokes difference. But where do those 6 shots of separation lay? Well, let's first take a look at the length. Polly Mack is 278.76. She's the furthest driver on the LPGA Tour to date. And the shortest driver is Lizette Salas, which is about 50 yards difference. And we will also see that 50-yard number appear on the PGA Tour. Now, that is 5 clubs difference on the approach. Does that really make a difference? Well, let's just take a look. So we know we have a 50-yard discrepancy on distance length. What about the fairways hit? So here is the percentages, 86.2%. Fairways hit, which is an immensely high percentage. Let's go look at the lowest. We have 49, so roughly 50%. So now that discrepancy goes to 30% between the best and the worst. So there's 50 yards difference and 30%. Now they don't work hand in hand. It doesn't mean that the one that hits it the furthest hits it the less accurate. So you're looking at an average tour percentage, fairways hit at about 66 to 70%. So now let's jump to greens and regulations. So we're at 74% with the highest and 50%. So now that discrepancy shrinks to 25%. So we can see that 50-yard difference in length works out to be about 25% difference in greens hit. Now keep in mind, this is as a group. And now let's look at the best putts when you hit the green in regulation. We have Nelly, who's at 1.75, and she's also the longest driver. So look at that. We have the longest driver and the best putter when the greens are regulation. So obviously we see her winning a lot more this year. So 1.75 is the best. The worst is 1.97. So now there is a 0.2 stroke difference. So if you take 18 greens, multiply it by 70%, that's 12 and a half greens. Let's call that 13 greens in regulation. Now if you multiply that by 0.2, you get a 2.6 stroke difference when you hit the green in regulation per round. Now you multiply that by 4, we're looking at a difference of 10 and a half strokes from first to last place. But it's still only 2.5 strokes difference every 18 holes. But now we factor in all the up and downs. So we see the best at 28.6 and the worst is now at 32.29. So there is a 4 stroke difference. So you can see that when you miss the green, your odds of getting up and down drop down. So obviously it's better to hit the green in regulation. The best in the world versus amateurs, those percentages are going to be off the charts different. The average golfer can only hit 5 or 6 fairways in regulation and 2 to 3 greens in regulation. Now I know that sounds very low. This is golfers across the spectrum. And the Sanseis, we see 73% as the highest and 20% as the lowest. So this is a 53% discrepancy. So this is a big area. We don't see as big of a dispersion in the fairways hit. We don't see as big of a dispersion in the greens in regulation hit. We see putting when it includes up and down from bunkers. So let's just jump straight over to the PGA Tour, and we see Scotty Scheffler has the best putting 1.76, where he is 1.68. So you can see how tight they are in putting. With the worst, you're looking at 1.87. So it is again a 0.2 roughly difference. So when you see something that happened, like we saw in the PGA Championship where Rory McIlroy missed 2 putts of that nature, it is not due to technicality, it is due to pressure. Let's jump right over to driver distance. So we saw about a 50-yard difference on the LPGA. We have 318.9 at Rory. We go to the shortest hitter there at 275. So again, we're looking at that rough 50-yard difference. Greens in regulation, you can see a clear lead here, 74.1 with Scotty Scheffler. The next person is 71%. That does make a difference because it doesn't introduce up and downs. Now, if we take a look at the difference between Scotty versus the worst, we have 56 and 74. 18% difference, which again is not that different, but at that level, hitting more greens equates to putts dropping because you can see that they are all pretty good putters. So here we have the best scrambler in golf today, just shy of 70%, which means that 30% of the time they are not getting up and down. Every time they hit the green, they are 99% of the time making par or better. When they miss the green, 30% of the time they are making bogey or worse. And the difference between the best is 69 versus 50, so there's a 20% difference. So across the board, both LPGA and PGA, they have very similar statistics, although the distances do change. We can see that there's about a 5-stroke difference in scoring average every round, and about 2.5 of those come from the best putters and the worst putters. But of those 2.5 strokes, up and downs play a big pivotal role. So up and down is an area you need to look for, but where does up and down directly relate to? Well, let's just talk about this. So the main thing that I want you to look for is your fairways hit and also your greens in regulation. It doesn't require a lot of math, but I want you to just put a little dot on your scorecard whenever you hit a fairway and a little dot on your scorecard when you hit the greens in regulation. On top of that, I want you to keep stats of how many putts it takes for you throughout the entire round. And then you're going to figure out what your putting average is when you hit the green in regulation and then also your total putts, which will include your up and downs. Do that for about 5 to 10 rounds, and that'll give you a good idea of where your weakness is. But keep in mind that driving distance does not make that big of a deal on the tour level, because they are such good ball strikers that they can still hit the greens in regulation 50 yards further back than the longest driver on the tour. We are not like that. So choosing the correct tee length is your biggest advantage or your biggest disadvantage, because if you can only hit it 240 yards but you're playing a set of tees where the designer designed those sets of tees for somebody that hits at 275, your fairways are not going to be hit as much, but then also your greens in regulation are not going to be hit as much, and then it's going to rely on a very steady short game, which most of us do not have because it takes a lot of effort to get a good short game. So you are leaving yourself vulnerable to a short game based round of golf. I want you to choose the correct tee, so find out how far you hit the golf ball and then choose the tee that promotes that length. So you are looking for an average second shot of anywhere from 130 to 170. So figure out how far your average drives are. It makes the game a lot easier, and then if you get your driving distance a little further, if you start hitting more greens in regulation, then back it up a tee. But if you stuck around this long, please make me the promise, start with a very forward set of tees, because when I play golf and I don't play for a while, I go to very forward tees. I play white tees a lot, and the total length is only about 6,500, and I enjoy the game a lot more. It gets my confidence up. If I'm not hitting a driver well enough, I can go back to a hybrid and still hit the fairways and leave myself with the shot of getting my green and regulations up. Number one is get the green and regulations up. How do we do that? Hit fairways and regulations. Just remember this statistic. You can hit the green and regulation 50% more times if you are on the fairway than when you are not on the fairway. So even if that means taking a hybrid off the tee to put you in the fairway, you are much better off doing that to try to get that green and regulation, because it's all about green and regulations. So give that a try. I hope that helps you. Glad to be back. I will be releasing some swing analysis videos coming up soon. You gotta forgive me, we're right in the middle of a busy season as well. So once things taper down, give it a few days. There should be something up there for you to watch. But glad to be back. Hope this helps you once again. Fairways and greens.